Welcome to Business Beyond Borders. I'm Cynthia Dearin. Many companies invest heavily in global strategy, but far fewer succeed in executing it once they hit real markets, real partners, and real complexity. Today, I'm joined by Mike Todd, a senior advisor at Dearin Associates and the person who works with our clients when strategy has to become action. Mike, welcome to the show.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Now, as you know, you and I disagree on, quite a few things.
A little bit, yes.
Often in fun.
Yeah.
What is the thing that's happening in the world right at the moment that you think is having the biggest impact on international trade?
The biggest thing across all of the things we're doing.
Yeah, the most consequential thing that's happening in the world today with all the crazy that's going on.
So I'll answer that in two parts, okay? I'll give you the thing that I think is the bluff and bluster and things that's happening behind, which is really going to affect things. I'm not sure tariffs mean a great deal at this point. I would go as far as to say that all the tariffs that have been put on so far haven't reached a P&L yet. So we can't really report on whether truly prices have gone up. Inflation's sort of under control in the US, so it's not making it.
Prices of groceries have shot through the roof, though.
That's true.
And healthcare.
Well, healthcare is a massive big. We could do a whole podcast on healthcare, but prices are relatively stable. Balance sheets may put that through over the next 18 months, but at the moment, I think it's more of a political tool rather than an economic tool. My biggest worry is AI. I think AI is going to have a massive effect over the next 18 to 24 months, and I think one of the things that worries me more than anything else is that the top 5 or 6 stocks are keeping up the US economy, and they could genuinely be overpriced, and genuinely the debt that's behind them is rolling debt. So NVIDIA is providing capital to all these companies to build. And nobody really seems to be talking about the power needed to run the data centers.
And how do you see that having a flow-on effect to international business?
Because I think if there is a looming crunch, then everything stops.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a real good chance in the next 6 to 12 months that we could be in a position where there is genuinely, I won't call it a crash, I don't know if it's a crash as such, but something that will wobble the market. And we're into unknown territory now. Although some of the dynamics, I would say, if you really delve into it, they're not as bad as 2008, but they are pretty scary.
So glass half full or half empty?
Elon said something the other day on a podcast where he said, I'd rather be an optimist that got it wrong rather than a pessimist that gets it right. And I'm always an optimist because I always think there's an angle. I always think there's an opportunity to trade out of anything.
Yeah.
That's what I tell my kids all the time. Michael Caine said it best when he was acting, and his director said to him, use the difficult. So where's the difficulty on stage? Use that in your performance.
Yeah.
And Michael Caine said to his kids, use the difficult. Where there's a difficult problem, use that as your angle to get out.
Yeah.
And I still maintain that now.
Now, you have had an absolutely fascinating career. You weren't always in international sales and execution.
No.
So, we could probably do a whole podcast on that too. But can you give us a quick gallop through how you got your start and then what led you, because listening to your accent, most people can probably tell you're not born in Australia.
No.
How did you wind up here in Australia doing international sales and execution?
Well, how I wound up here was meeting my wife in a very twee way at a wedding, and I decided to make a go after the bridesmaid's sister. It'd been really bad. And that's how I met Larissa, my wife. That was actually 22 years ago this Sunday, which I've just been reminded of.
Congratulations.
22
Make sure
years.
you don't forget it.
3 years off a life sentence, as I say. I might have been getting out by now. So that's how I came to Australia.
Yeah.
And when we got married, I was desperate to come straight away. I said, let's go to Australia. But she was in London and loved London. We just fell into the London lifestyle for 7 or 8 years. And then there was the financial crash, and there was a real time in London where you really thought this was it. There's nothing left. So we used that as an opportunity to come back. So we came back in 2010 to a country that never really had a crash, but coined the acronym, the GFC, for never having actually had one, which is always fascinating. That's why I came here. That was my reason to come. Kids were young and we brought them up, and now Izzy's just finished HSC. So that was 15 years ago.
And in terms of your work, you didn't start out in international sales, did you?
Well, you could say I did a little bit. I now realise that my desperation to get out of house and home at 16 was probably mainly neurodivergent, that was sort of in me at 16, but now can be somewhat diagnosed. But I needed to get out, and off I went, and that was it. I joined the Navy because my grandfather was in the Navy, and it was either that or the local nuclear power plant.
Okay.
It was true. It was either that or my friends did. Some were carpenters, welders, techs, and I thought, I'm not doing that. So packed my bags and got on a train at Carlisle, and the next thing I knew, I was having my head shaved in Plymouth, and I'd signed on for 22 years. That's it.
Gosh.
That was it. Done and dusted. I got out after 7, which you could naturally leave at 7. There was a 7-14, and if you did 14 years, you might still do 22 to your pension.
And you spent a lot of that time floating around under pack ice, as I understand it.
Well, yeah, I can sort of say that now because most of it's on YouTube. It technically should be secret, but given the fact that Greenland has just made everybody aware of the submarine routes, we spent a lot of time chasing boats around the North Atlantic. Yeah. That's as much as I can say on it. Which I'll probably be shot now, given the fact I've just said that on a podcast.
Oh, otherwise you'll have to kill me after.
Otherwise I'll have to kill you after, yeah.
Fair enough.
But it's interesting when I think about it now, because I was always interested in international, always interested in travel. And at the time we were doing a lot of our being at sea, we were technically selling British. So where we went, there was always, and you may know this from your own time in the Middle East, a lot of it was captain's parties.
Yeah.
So if you were on duty at where there was an event, it was sort of a double-edged sword, because you were there and you were, we've got to dress really well tonight, but you all got the scraps of food.
Yep.
And also all the dignitaries that came down. You could have a lot of fun by telling people where to go to the loo or where they could go to get wherever, and send them into completely the wrong direction. So that was fun.
So how did you go from that to, what happened? Because at some point you must have left the Navy, and then.
So I left. I managed to persuade what was at the time Curry's Electrical. Now that you may know as Dixon Stores Group, as a big retail group in the UK. A little bit like what do we have here? JB,
Bingley.
Bingley and JB sort of combined. And I managed to persuade them that my naval service was equal to a degree.
Uh-huh.
It was really stretching it a little bit, but I managed to get in on a graduate program. And an early graduate program, I had my own shops in about 9 months. So I had staff and I ran shops all over the north of England. And I loved it. I loved running my own shop. I loved to have my own sales profile. And as you know, I loved, and still is one of my favorite jobs, was selling washing machines. I still love the thought and the act of selling a washing machine.
Why is that?
Because you were selling a solution.
Yeah.
And it's always, it's still part of my sales training now. You find what the customer doesn't know they know.
Yeah.
You tell them that, and then you just wait for the money.
And how did that look?
So it sort of went like this. So you'd have to imagine me now, and it probably would be a pink shirt at the time. My lovely tie on.
Curry's somewhere
Curry's
here.
badge, Mike Todd.
Hello, my name is Mike.
Yeah. I would, my hair would be great because it would be longer than it is now. And I would sort of float down to the front of the shop, and there would be, predominantly at the time, it would be ladies, because the financial control of running the house in the late 90s was the woman. So she was doing the shopping for the white goods. So you would get sort of very close to the lady. She might have a pram. She might have her kids with her. She might be on her own. And she would immediately sort of put the barriers up and say, no, go away. I'm just looking. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was, I'm just browsing. It's just browsing. And then you would say, that's okay. And you'd sort of slightly turn. And then you'd do a sort of a double take and say, just out of interest, how many kids have you got? And she'd go, well, I've got 2. How old are they? Well, they're 8 and 12. That's interesting. You're sort of at the wrong end. You need a 1300 spin. Why do I need a 1300 spin? Well, because if it's 800, it doesn't get the water out too well and you're going to dry on the line. At that point, once you'd engaged on the spin, that was it. The sale was going to come in. Because they were browsing, nobody browses washing machines. Everybody who goes in to look for a washing machine, their washing machine failed the day before.
Yeah.
They're going to buy. So once the hook of the spin was in and they realized I wasn't a predator, then they would open up to what they were going to buy, what's the best washing machine, which is the best guarantee. And after that, I might as well have said, can I have your MasterCard? Would have been that man. Can I have your Visa card or your MasterCard? Because you're going to buy. It's just a matter of when.
So this is not where I was planning to go, but what's the equivalent of the spin in an international sale?
So that's a really good question. It would be around somebody coming to you that says, well, you know my client base at the moment, and I've got some interesting clients that I manage. So it would be around about what problem are you solving? So there's a really interesting brand. Can I mention the brand on here? Because am I able to do that?
Yeah, and if they don't like it, we could always bleep it out afterwards.
Right, okay. So I have a very interesting brand that I did some work with last year, which is called Shewear. And you may ask, as the audience may ask, what is Shewear? So a great lady called Stacey had damaged her foot on a building site because she wasn't wearing the right boots. And she went to buy some new boots, some safety boots. And she realized that all the boots she was buying were for men's feet. Now, you in your shoes now, your lovely heels, that's a woman's last, and my last is you can have a sports last and you can have a walking last, etc. But in safety boots, nobody really cares. It's just a safety boot first. The fit and feel of it doesn't really matter. And she said, well, actually, there's a whole lot of women that are coming into the workforce who want to be builders, who want to work on a lot of the ladies we see who do the work with directing traffic. They're all ladies, and they need the right
footwear.
Right footwear. Yeah. So she went out and crafted some boots that were specifically for women. And that is clever. I like that. That's a solution to a problem that nobody knows there is a problem. And then she's used those to get overseas. And very interestingly, just as she's doing this, the European Union has put a directive out that says that all PPE now, because of what's happening through COVID, etc., which brings in safety, all has to be sized specifically for a gender. And that is the angle. So the angle now is going out, not selling the boot, but selling the fit.
Okay.
And once you sell the fit, the boots
so
irrelevant.
Like want safety boots that fit right.
That's it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Corrie's for a sec. Can you just take us quickly through how you got from Corrie's to sitting in front of me at this podcast?
So there is a natural progression. So from Currys, I wanted to get out of the retail side, the customer facing side on the shop floor. A lot of reasons. Retail's quite hard because you're working weekends and you've got a day off through the week. So that wasn't working for me at the time. Plus, I thought I had a lot to offer on the brand side. So I liked the product. So I'd look at product and say, well, that's not marketed correctly, or that's the wrong price, or if this was presented differently, we'd sell a lot more of it.
Yeah. So where did you go?
Well, I couldn't get into marketing. So again, trying to get from where I was as retail into London head office to marketing was almost impossible. So I switched to to get into the smoke, to get down to London. I had to go back into retail. So I went into a sports retailer called Lillywhites, and I ran their concessions at Heathrow and Gatwick. And that then allowed me to sort of swap over into brands. So I went from retail into sports brands. So I worked for a number of sports brands. I fell into analysis, and that then pushed me into the sales side of it. And I tell you what it was now. I sat at Mizuno in their subsidiary in Reading, And there was this guy came in, and he would come in infrequently. And I'd watch him come in. He usually had a tan, and he would bring in a duty-free bag. And inside the duty-free bag, don't smoke, children, don't smoke, would be 200 cigarettes.
Okay.
And he would give all the cigarettes out to the desk. And it was his way of saying, I'm back from a trip. And I would say to the people on my desk, what does he do? Because he's never in. And when he comes in, he's always got off a plane. And they said, oh, he's in charge of international. And I said, where's he been? Well, he's just been to Italy to see the distributor. And I went, that is a job for me. So I then went looking for, and I sort of had to recraft myself to be that international person. And I loved running brands across international. And that's what I did for many years before I then, when I came to Australia, I sort of opened up my black book and said, well, I've helped so many brands into the Asia Pacific. I've worked across Europe. I've worked across the States, that I then said, I'm here as a gun for hire. Go forward several years. I meet you in an event, and your ability to add a lot more finesse to what I was doing has allowed me then to make that sort of transition complete.
This episode is brought to you by OFX. One of the things we see all the time with companies expanding internationally is that the strategy might be sound, the market choice might be right, but the financial plumbing is just not keeping up. Managing global finances can quickly turn into juggling currencies, unpredictable cash flow, and far too much admin. OFX helps take that friction out. They're trusted by more than 37,000 businesses worldwide, and they make it easier to pay international suppliers and teams in local currencies, while saving on FX fees and simplifying the admin through one platform. If your business is operating across borders, OFX gives you clearer visibility and more control over your cash flow. You can find out more at ofx.com, and we'll put a link in the description. So what's the first global expansion you worked on that taught you how hard the execution piece of international expansion really is?
The one that really had the biggest effect on me at the beginning was a colleague and I, we set up a small agency. Well, he set the agency up, and I ended up being his international guy. And we had a contract with Deckers. Deckers is a corp out of California in Santa Barbara. And
for people who don't know what it is.
So Deckers owns, well, Deckers at the time owned the brands Teva, Simple, and UGG Australia.
Okay.
Now, Teva is an outdoor strappy sandal brand for people who do a lot of hiking. It's now a bit of a trend item, so kids know it now. But at the time, in the early 2000s, it was just a hiking brand, outdoor brand. Simple was a skate brand, of which was when Simple was more Californian. It then turned a bit aggressive, so Simple as a brand was buried, but a great brand. And UGG Australia was a little-known sheepskin brand. Back
when we all thought that UGG boots were the worst item of footwear one could possibly own, and nobody would be caught dead in a pair.
So, when Reese and I got married, which we were married very quickly, that's another podcast at some point, but when she came to my flat in London, on my table, and this might get bleeped out because I won't be able to say it, but I had Danny Minogue's boot.
Okay.
And we'd done a painter boot competition to try and get some traction.
Yeah.
And Reese looked at this boot and said, oh, what is that? And I said, oh, it's an UGG boot. What do you think? And she said, I hate them. And she used a slur at the time, which is very bad. She said, oh, they're very Westy. Uh-huh. And I said, what is Westy? I realised that's not a particularly nice term to use. However, go forward about 3 months from that point.
Yeah.
And all the press that UGG was getting, she said to me, can you get me a pair of boots? I said, oh, I'll try and get a pair of boots. Those boots, by the way, my daughter's wearing now. They're 20 years old.
Gosh, so they last.
And not only have the boots lasted, but the brand is that strong that my daughter still sees it as a signature brand and still wearing it the same way.
So this, I mean, it kind of sounds like a fairy tale. So which bit of this equation was the bit that was hard execution-wise?
So I and again, this is a bigger part of the story. I always say to myself, what's worse, chasing sales or having too many to deal with? And I can tell you that too many sales is dangerous because you never get ahead of the curve. And when you're in the tragic situation of having an Italian distributor that says, I want 50,000 pairs and I need it by this time, you tend to then lean all the way into, or try to lean into production as much as you can. You maybe don't get the best administration. You never catch up. And then you've got finance, because some of these distributors, we know that, they'll overcommit and then really have problems in paying, because 50,000 times an FOB price, that's a chunky bit of change you've got to pay for production and then to get shipping done. So that was at a point where it scaled very, very quickly from one distributor in Holland called Mart. He was buying 8,000 pieces. And from that one distributor, over a period of 7 months, it went to multiple European distributors. So it went from 8,000 to 250,000 pairs. And
wow, that's over how many months?
7.
Gosh.
7. It was horrendous. And what it then led me to try and do, and which we've refined over the years, is that when we're looking at sort of the 10 must-haves that a distributor has got to have in order to make them trade to the best of the brand's ability and to the best of their ability, that wasn't thought about. It was, who can you give it out to quick enough to get, and contracts, I'm not going to think of that now, let's get them trading.
Yeah.
Let's get them transacting, and we'll do the contract later.
Yeah.
Which we all know now, it left an absolute...
Definitely no.
Just a horrendous mess. I mean, we left a marvelous profile, and then I went from there to work for a sailing brand. So I was proud of what I'd done, but I also recognized that building quickly is a challenge without the structures behind it. And sometimes you've got to sort of say you've got to slow down a little bit in order to let the system catch up. And I'm very proud of what happened with them, because I look at boots now and how famous they are. I wish I'd bought stock, by the way, at $9.
What is it now?
Well, it topped out at 165.
Yikes.
No split, no nothing. And Deckers, with all of that money, went on to buy Hoka.
Yeah.
And Hoka's now $1 billion brand within their portfolio. Yeah. So what they learned from UGG, it's catapulted that company to be now a.
So if you worked on that again, what would you do differently?
I would put a lot more processes in. I would try to be, which again, it's not now, but the sort of international expansion 20 years ago was a little bit gung-ho. It was a bit cowboy. Yeah. I don't say this with pride that I've done maybe 12 Vegas shoe shows, and I really can only remember about 6. I mean, in truth, there were 6 of them which they're sketchy, because it was just one massive big party. Yeah. And we were partying relatively hard. You go back 20 years previous to that, and I can't tell you how they partied. Right. If you can go back to LA Gear, there's some stories that come out about LA Gear, which is truly, that's an X-rated podcast. You sort of go one step up.
We'll put that inside the members portal.
Yeah, that'll be bleeped out if I said everything that I was told, never witnessed. So I'd slow things down. I'd make it more organized, as organized as you can be when there's demand. If there's a pull from the market, you've got to manage that pull.
And look, that's a great segue for where I want to go next. You often say, strategy is just theory until it's tested on the ground. What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, I mean, it's a little bit like, I'm trying to think of the apt sort of, and you may know this from where you've worked in the Middle East. I mean, all strategy melts when you're confronted with the enemy. It's gone. I mean, you can plan.
Looks great on paper, and then you show up,
and then you show up, and
it doesn't work like this.
It doesn't work.
All.
It's completely different. And that is international business, because you end up with all of that sort of theory. We're going to do this, and then the rubber meets the road, and you've got to adapt.
That said, though, going with a strategy is still better than going with no strategy.
No strategy. At least you've got. I mean, I love. And I don't want to take us down the rabbit hole, but I loved Shell with its invention of coming up with strategies for things that never happen. So if
what's the scenario planning?
Scenario planning,
known unknowns, unknown knowns, black swan events.
And Shell realized, I think it was one disaster, and the disaster came out and said, well, we don't know what to do, but this is a predictable problem. Yeah. We could have an accident, so what do we do? So they created a scenario planning department, and I love the thought of people sitting around a table saying, "Can you give us an idea of what could happen?" Well, that could happen. Let's plan around that.
I think the
So
funniest thing, though, is where you do that exercise, because I remember a time when we did that exercise in our team for something that we were doing, and we thought of every terrible thing that could go wrong. It was to do with an event, actually.
Yeah.
And we worked out contingencies for all of them, and we turned up the next day. And the one thing that we hadn't banked on happened, and the room was not available.
Yeah. Well, there you go back. Michael Caine would say, "Lean into the difficult" on that. So
we definitely did.
You've got to, it's this meeting is immediately turned into a meeting at the bar.
Yeah,
it has to be somewhere.
Yeah.
So we'll have to
do something different.
But it's yes, you've got to have a plan. You've got to know what, and you've got to understand the one thing that Australia, bless it in a way, doesn't really get a lot of is that because of where we are in the world, all the way down at the bottom, our seasonality is completely turned around.
Yeah.
So there's only us in South Africa that has the same seasonal calendar. Everything else
Brazil?
No, if you look on the map, they still use a spring summer.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's only South Africa that truly operate counter-cyclical. So any Australian business that's selling Northern Hemisphere has to really run two critical paths, because it's got to have an Australian launch, and it has to have potentially an EU launch. It's also got to plan its finance and budgeting, because you guarantee to sit in a meeting and say, we need to do this, and say, well, we've not budgeted for that. So you need to think long term.
And I know you've seen some, again, we won't breach anybody's confidentiality, but I know you've seen some examples of that quite recently. People have said, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then the CEO says one thing, and you go and you talk to the CFO, and they're like, oh, we have no budget for any of those things. And you're like, how will we progress this?
Well, it goes to some of the models that we love selling, things like the strategy session, because on that you'd ask people those direct questions about things that they need to think about if they're going to go international.
Do you have any money to do this project?
Do you have money? I mean, you can do it bootstrapped. I mean, you can do it from the cash you've got, but you've really got to think long and hard about where you're going.
Yeah. And is it going to be worth that risk you'll take and the investment you'll make to do it?
And I mean, interestingly, I always think that the risk is worth it, because I think the reward is huge. You get it right, the reward is massive.
Yeah.
And as Australia, Australia is it's a large country, small population, relatively small market. So if you're really successful here, what could you do outside?
Yeah.
And in reality, you could be treble.
Yeah.
Your European office will swallow your Australian office.
I know you've got clients at the moment that are on track to do that over the medium term. Yeah. And that's very gratifying when you see that happen from a relatively modest beginning.
It is, and one of those clients, we had we're bringing on board a PR company now to begin to tell the story of what we've achieved, and they're amazing stories. They're amazing what this company's managed to do in 18 months, and actually, find itself in the position of being awarded what am I looking for? It's an award that it's got for innovation by a sports organization in Germany. That award alone, once we get the words out there, whereas we would sell 2,000 and 3,000 of their product here, one order in Germany could be 30,000.
Wow.
And that isn't even scratching the surface of an 80 million people market that ineffectively invented walking around in hills for fun.
Yeah.
So the opportunities for a lot of amazingly good product here to sell that Australian way of doing it overseas. I mean, I am the best non-Australian to sell Australia.
Yeah.
And I sell it very well.
I agree with that, especially the hat.
Yeah, where's my crock hat?
I don't know. You didn't bring it today.
I should have brought it.
So we talk a lot about structure at DNA. Yeah. You know, I'm very keen on structure, frameworks, dashboards, playbooks, but you always remind me that none of that works without relationships. Let's talk a bit about that.
I maybe should have said when I joined the team a couple of years ago that I can sort of break things down into parts very, very quickly. So I like to get to know the person behind the brand, because once I know the person behind the brand, then I can get to know what they're thinking and then make that work. the entrepreneurs behind some of the brands that we deal with they're an interesting bunch. They're how they've got to the point they are. They've created something which is theirs personally. They've got vested interest in it. So I like to get a relationship. I'm a bit more collegiate. I like to, most of the.
What does it look like in practice?
Well, as they say, most great parties end up in the kitchen. Most of don't drink, kids. But most of what you can get on a good night out or a trade event will give you really down to the insights of what that brand is, the absolute essence of what it's trying to sell.
Yeah.
What solution is it actually solving? What is it?
Or what are they really struggling with that they're not telling you about? They won't say in the boardroom, but they will say over dinner.
They'll say it over dinner. And that's why I've always liked this job, because it is very much it's a collegiate exercise. You've got to get to know that person. You're going to spend a long time with them. You're going to spend a lot of their money, because this is not a cheap exercise to go overseas. So you want to make sure that you've got you've got as much knowledge about them as you possibly can to make sure that you're carrying their dream to where they want to take it.
Yeah. And just following on from that, how do you think relationships accelerate or block sales once you actually get into market?
Well, and there again, it's a very, very good point, because for example, you speak beautiful French, so you've an affinity to the French nation, and we have some French colleagues who work in the company. Selling in France is not easy. The agents you need to use, they can be prickly, they can be difficult to manage. So your ability to understand relationships, if you haven't got that at the beginning, you try landing in a country where you're dealing with a whole lot of agents or a whole lot of people that have their way of doing things, and you coming in telling them what to do, it's never going to work. You've got to work alongside them to get the best out of what they can do. And of course, some brands are seen differently in market. What you think you're selling when you get into market, the market can twist it. It can sort of move the brand into an area that you never thought you would get into. The client in question that won the award won it in a category that it never really was going for. It just happened that its product
resonated differently in another market.
And all of a sudden they went, we can make a kit like that. And that kit eventually is the best kit that anybody had ever thought about. Those relationships are important. And also understanding, if you're dealing with distributors, who are the actual people in the company that move the needle?
Yeah.
And it may not be management. It may be somebody, getting to know who does shipping, getting to know the clerks who do the invoice raising.
Yeah.
You need to know these people in order to fast track things, especially if you've got, so for example, a couple of minutes ago, a brand sending me some samples. So sending samples here into Australia. Now I know that it needs a commercial invoice.
Yeah.
Now I need that commercial invoice like straight away, because samples that get stuck in customers. So I need to tell who the person is at the desk exactly how I need that invoice to be done for Australian customers, and I need it done like tomorrow.
Yeah.
So figuring out who these people are at the beginning could save you 10 days.
Years of your life and millions of dollars.
Hey, exactly. And we're talking about things that are, they're consumer goods. If you're talking about things that are big ticket items.
A tunnel boring machine, for example.
Yes, exactly. So, you need to know who in the company actually gets, you believe this, get shit done.
Yeah.
That's the person you need to know, because that's the person you need to be able to push things through before there is a structure, because you tend to be a lone gun doing the work, building things, and then the structures build around it.
Yeah. I want to take a minute to talk about the blueprint for international success, which, as you know, is our proprietary framework for taking clients into international markets. I use it a lot in my strategy work, but I would love to know, how do you use that framework in the execution work that you do with clients?
So I like to get to a point where, not that I'm sort of shining it back to them all the time to say, listen, we did this 6 months ago. How are we doing on this particular framework now? Have you improved this? again, with a number of clients, because of my tenure here at DNA, I'm seeing those CEOs, managing directors that started with us that knew nothing. And now, and it's really interesting because some of them tend to be, oh, no, Mike, we can't do that now. And I go, okay, all right. You don't have to tell me. I told you that 18 months ago. But somehow, yeah, okay. You now understand it, which is good because you're telling me to slow down. Yeah. You're telling me that you can't do that, Mike, until we've got this. Yeah, okay, I know that's on the bit of paper we did, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. So it's really good when you get qualification from a client of all the work you've done in the past. But I also like when we actually run through is getting the client in a position where they're honest with themselves. Can you do that? And it's okay to say you can't.
And sometimes people are not honest about it at the strategy phase because they don't want to have a scorecard that has lots of red and orange on it because it feels like showing people your, financial statements or your dirty laundry. But when you get to the execution phase, I'm hoping that people are being honest at that point because at that point, money is getting spent, resources are being deployed, risk is being taken, real risk.
Well, I've had a meeting this morning. Won't mention the client with what's called, it's effectively the CFO, but I think they're called the growth or revenue officer, something like that. And I have a little bit of an interesting dynamic between the founder and CEO and really what's going on internally. But interestingly, between both of us this morning, we're both going to lean into what the CEO founder wants to see. We've got to give them something to allow them to mentally see where this is going. So in some ways, and I if there was ever, if we can have some form of training going forward, I'm a really big believer in NLP. And I think you've really got to, NLP techniques are good for international because we really need to get to the core of how that person thinks. When are they honest? Are they not being honest about something? And dragging it out of them. And I think if we, I do it sort of automatically. I'm good at getting to the I think I am getting to the bottom of what people think. So that to me is important, the blueprint, to make sure that you get the real honesty at the beginning, but the relationship good enough that they can tweak and come back and say, I know I said that, but I really don't know how to do it. How do we do that?
And if you had to pick out one execution habit that separates companies that actually scale internationally from companies that say they're going to do it and then never really get there, what would that one execution habit be?
In terms of what I would like them to understand is areas around, I love the word forecast. Forecasting to me is a really interesting word because nobody can predict the future, but you can begin to put some milestones in to give you the best ability to be ready for that future that's coming. He
who predicts the future controls the future.
Exactly.
Right?
And I lean into that a lot. I also, as we know, I lean into pricing. I think pricing is massively important.
Probably often ignored.
It's massively ignored. And I've changed my stance on this a little bit. And you and I have a difference of opinion sometimes on tariffs, and that's, we could do a whole tariff thing. I understand why tariffs exist for any country to use them as a political tool, but I also want the consumer doesn't really understand where the pricing of some product is. I mean, you take a $30 product at a shop, you half it. It's because the retailer takes half. The retailer takes all the money. I mean, in truth, when you look at the margins before that, it gets less and less and less. So it's very, very important at the beginning to understand where the price breaks are, because you need to ensure that everybody's making money. If one piece of that chain doesn't make money, then nobody makes any.
Yeah.
And you set yourself up for disaster. And we've done some pricing exercises before where we've said, we're out. You've got a good cash profile, but there's
nothing left.
There's nothing left. And you're kidding yourselves if you think that you can carry on, because all you're doing is digging a hole. You might as well stop and start again.
So coming back to where we began this episode, before we wrap up, what is your one piece of advice for CEOs and founders scaling internationally in 2026?
So I would say, and we come back to what I said before, that I am I'm an optimist that would rather get it wrong, and I think that Australia is a unique, massively unique country in what it creates here. Has an Australian lilt to it that I think I can look at a product, I can look at its packaging and say that's Australian. I know that's Australian. It stands out on a shelf. It is a country of invention. It's girt by sea, so it has to come up with its own. It's got its own internal challenges. I often say that Australia. The reason that Mad Max exists as a movie is because I think that's what we'd turn into. We'd just have to re-engineer everything all the time that was left, because you're not importing anymore.
Yeah.
So that car has to become a crane, has to become a plow, whatever it needs to be. It's got to cover a whole load of bases.
Yeah.
So we naturally invent things. And I would say to the CEOs, don't be afraid of international, embrace it, plan for it, and get out there and explore. I mean, we sell our unique viewpoint of the world to everybody else, and they all love it.
Mike, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.